All right, good morning. Welcome to the webinar. Thanks for taking the time to join us this morning. Today's agenda, we're going to cover how you can create custom layouts that are easy to use, manage your workspace to match your work preferences, and you're going to learn how to save shortcuts to your most used workspaces so you can easily access them later. As always, if you have any questions during this webinar, email us at webinars@logos.com. We will be answering questions at the end of the webinar. If you're interested in learning how to improve your experience with Logos, consider attending Camp Logos. Head over to logos.com/camp to find a Camp Logos happening near you. Today's webinar presenter is Todd Bishop. Todd has been a Logos user for the past 8 years. He's a Bible study expert and a master at using Logos Bible software effectively. So without further ado, here's Todd.
Good morning. Thanks, Art. It's glad to be here with you guys to talk about sermon layouts this morning. We've had a lot of feedback here recently about layouts, creating layouts, and it seems that everyone's doing things a little differently. You can see here I'm starting with a blank screen. Let me go ahead and clear this out. But when we look at some of the examples that I'll walk you through today, just keep two principles in mind if you would. First, when we create layouts, we want to try to reduce clicks. We want to get at the information we want faster. The second thing we want to do is we want to create a layout that delivers quality insight. We want to get at the information we need to help prepare a sermon that will impact people's lives. So different layouts, just kind of a rule of thumb here, can be used for different tasks. Let me show you just a few examples that I've saved in my layouts menu. Come over here to layouts, and I'm going to click on the first one, Old Testament witnesses. If the page loads, you'll see that this is very technical. I use this layout when analyzing different textual variants in the Old Testament. For some of you this is extremely intimidating, but let me kind of walk you through what this looks like just to give you an example of one task that this one layout is used for. In the top left I have a modern Hebrew version. I have several ancient versions including the Targums, the Vulgate at the bottom left, the Leiden Peshitta, which is the Syriac version, and then the ESV at the bottom. You'll notice they're all linked together, so when I scroll, they all scroll together and they stay up with one another. So, and then on the far right, I don't want to forget this, the text comparison of the Dead Sea Scrolls. So I love this layout. I use it often, but it's for a very specific task. It's very focused, and it may be something that you use in the past, but maybe you'll use it in the future as well. But also if you go into layouts, kind of the other end of the spectrum, Old Testament witnesses is what we looked at. Look at Bible study or study Bible layout. This is a little bit different. Let the page load just for a second. Well, we had just one problem. Let me restart my program here. So again, it's different tasks for different layouts. We had one on Old Testament witnesses, very technical, and we want to look at another one that's kind of the other end of the spectrum, study Bible layout. Hopefully it'll load this time. There we go. This one's a lot different. We have just two panels. On the right-hand side, we have the NRSV. This is the New Revised Standard Version, one of my preferred versions. The neat thing about the NRSV is that it covers all 66 books of the canon, but it also covers the apocryphal literature. So you'll see here on the right I have the NRSV. On the left I have some commentary provided by the Faith Life Study Bible. Again, you'll notice that I've linked these two panels together with link set A, so that now when I scroll in my Bible text, the Faith Life Study Bible keeps up with me. So right now we're in 1 Corinthians chapter 1. The neat thing about this is that I've also linked this to the Apocrypha book, so I continue to have commentary no matter where I'm at, whether I'm in the Bible or whether I'm in secondary literature. Let's go to 1 Maccabees together. I go to 1 Maccabees, look, it changes from the Faith Life Study Bible now to the commentary on the Apocrypha of the Old Testament. And again, these two resources are linked together to provide running commentary along with the text. So those are really two ends of the spectrum, two good examples of what you can do with layouts, one very technical, one very simplistic. But today's webinar is focused on sermon preparation. How can we create a layout that's going to help us in preparing our sermons? Again, to give us less clicks and to give us good information. So we're going to start creating first by closing all of these panels. And we're going to create what I call a basic preaching layout. This first layout is going to give us the basic tools for preparing a message. We're going to have an English Bible that's going to help us read the text. We're going to have a modern Greek version of the New Testament, or an interlinear, really depending on your preference there, also for reading the text. We're going to open a scholarly lexicon. This is for looking up words. We're going to open a commentary that we trust. This is for gaining insight and comparing the results we come to a trusted scholar. Then we're going to open the information pane. This is going to help us quickly reference and compare English versions and to see snippets of information that are going to help us down the road. Finally, we're going to open or apply some very cool visual filters that are going to help us along the way. So let's dive in. Let's start building this thing. First, we want to open the ESV. Everything's going to be done from the command box. So if you go to the command box and begin typing ESV, you'll see it here. I'm going to put that on the left, grab the resource title and drag it where you want it. We could easily put it on the right-hand side by dragging the tab and placing it there. Wherever you drag and drop, there it's going to stay. Now, the ESV is a resource that I use so often that I've put it in my favorites bar. What you can do there is you can click on the resource title and actually drag it into your favorites bar, and it's going to save it at the top of your layout. You can then choose any icon system that helps you identify it. So that's a quick way to open it. Let me just show you how that works. Now I can just click on the ESV and it opens it on the right. I'm going to put it on the left over here. When you have the ESV open, I'm going to open to a specific text that we're going to be building a sermon on today, on 143. This is the calling of Philip and Nathaniel. Then after the ESV, we want to open the Greek New Testament. I prefer the NA28. That on the right. Then we want a Greek lexicon. Of course, my favorite, probably everybody's favorite here, is BDAG, one of the most trusted Greek to English lexicons in existence today. Definitely the most comprehensive. Then we want to open up a trusted commentary. The commentary, again, is one that covers most of the New Testament. For me, the one that I choose is the NAC, the New American Commentary. Since we're studying the book of John, we want to add NAC into the command bar, then the word John, and you'll see it's our first option, John 1 through 11. We're going to put this at the bottom right. Now we want to link three of these panels together so that they scroll together. First, we'll link the ESV to link set A. Click on the resource panel menu, choose link set A. Do the same thing for the NA28, link set A, and then for the commentary. Now let's go back and re-enter John 1:43. Make sure everybody's on the same page. All right, we're ready to go. Now, in addition to this, on the far right, we want to open what's called the information pane. Go to your Tools menu and select Information under the Lookup section. This always opens in the same place. It's going to open on the far right in a small panel. Once you're in the information pane, we're just about there. If you want to rearrange this any way you want, that's fine too. You've got those options. For me, I like to read left to right, so I like to work left to right. Another thing is you'll notice we only have 5 panels here. Some people create a layout with many more panels. They're smaller, they're more condensed. For me, I don't like all the noise. I like something that's a little bit more simplistic, and I like to have more context when I'm reading something. So this is totally just my preference. You do things the way that you want it. That's the neat thing about layouts. We can customize them and make them our own. So next we want to turn on what is called sympathetic highlighting. We can do this in the English text and in the Greek text by going into the Visual Filters button and checking sympathetic highlighting. And do the same thing for the NA28. Go to Visual Filters and click sympathetic highlighting. You'll see mine's already turned on there. This is going to allow me to highlight a phrase in English and see the phrase in Greek. So even if you're not very familiar with Greek, this is a great way to compare the English text with the Greek text and make sure you're following along and you're in the right place. So this is one thing we need to do. Then finally, we need to go into BDAG and open up the visual filter and click Link to Open Panels. Link to Open Panels is going to allow us to click on a word in our NA28 and see the verse reference highlighted under each lemma entry. And I'll show you what I mean here in just a second. So now that we're set up, let's get started. What I can do with this layout is I can be reading through the text. For instance, in John 1:43, it says, "The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. And because of this decision, it says he found Philip, and he said to him, 'Follow me.' And Philip leaves, and Philip goes and he finds Nathanael." What's interesting to me is the word decide. You'll see that I've highlighted it in English. It's also been highlighted in Greek. But look over to the information pane. You can see that it's translated in several of my popular New Testament Bibles. It's translated differently. Some places it's translated as decide, some places it's translated as wanted to. That's interesting. It's almost as if some translators have decided to translate it as something Jesus purposed to do or resolved to do, and others have translated it as something he wanted to do. So let's dig in just a little bit further. You can see a short snippet of information under the lemma fellow. Here is from BDAG, you see this, but it's not extremely helpful. So to go one step further, double-click the term in your Greek New Testament. Etheleson has the Greek lemma of fellow. You can see the entry down the bottom left. Now, we're going to be able to scroll through this entry in BDAG and find the two top definitions. Number one says to have desire for something, to wish to have, to desire, or to want. And that's interesting. That's kind of like the way that the KJV translates it, or even the NL or the LEB, or even the NKJV. So let's keep scrolling down. We'll see the second definition. Under number two, it says it's also translated to have something in mind for oneself, to have a purpose, to be resolved, a will, a wish, a want, to be ready. That's interesting because that's the way that the ESV is translated. Jesus decided to go. Now, when conducting a word study, it's important to check out concrete results. You want to see concrete instances where this word is used, and then compare those instances and come to a conclusion. So under number two, if you keep scrolling, you'll see in pink highlight I have John 1:43. This is our reference above. That's what links to open panels will do. It will link your reference to the open panel that you've selected, which in our case is the BDAG lexicon. So that's what you can do here, doing a little bit of word study there. And then, of course, you can always consult your commentaries when you come to a conclusion. It's a great way to make sure that you're on track with some of the academic field, some people that think the same way and have done the research as well. So that's one basic layout. That's for preaching in the New Testament specifically. But now I want to change gears just a little bit and show you a layout that I use personally every single week. It's a little more advanced, but it allows me to create my sermon from start all the way to finish, from deep exegesis, even some text comparison, all the way to the application of the message. So let me show you that. We're not going to create that together because we just did that. What I want to do for this one is actually close all my panels and then go back into my Save Layouts. This time I'm going to select the one called Preaching New Testament Exegetical. Let's hope I don't shut down here. There we go. Great. All right. So I've got it open here for us. And the first thing we'll notice is that we have 4 panels, but in some of the panels we have multiple tabs, which you can see by clicking on those additional tabs. And you'll also notice that I've linked most of these panels together, except for BDAG, because that's a reference work. We can double click on any word in the NA28 and open BDAG to that exact entry. So let's walk through this together. I'll explain what we're looking at, and then I'll explain what we can do with this layout. First, on the top left, we have the ESV. It's open to John 5:3. The ESV is the translation that I prefer. You can put any translation there that you want, but this is where I start, reading the English text. On the top right, notice again I have the NA28. So what I have is an English to Greek side-by-side view of the text. Next, I have an exegetical guide, but you'll notice there's a couple of things different about the exegetical guide. What I've done is I've added a few sections. I've added a parallel passages section, a sermons section, and commentaries. This includes all my commentaries, with my first 5 top commentaries showing first. To add these sections to a custom guide, go into Add, and you can make these selections from the list below. You'll see the ones that I've selected are now grayed out. So I encourage you to take advantage of that. Very helpful to kind of keep yourself in one place and not having to jump around, open up a bunch of different guides. Make the guide the way that you want it, and Logos gives you that ability. You'll also notice that in the word by word section, I want to change something here. We're going to open it up, and we're going to go into settings. So you're the section header for word by word. In settings, we're going to open up settings, and we're going to say only include, and then we're going to deselect all of the parts of speech that we have options for here. What this is going to allow us to do is it's going to, again, give us that Greek to English side by side. I can hover over a word in the Greek or in the English and see the Greek equivalent. Sorry. I can also click on a Greek word and automatically open the word by word section that's going to give me all of this word information. It's going to give me the transliteration. It's going to let me hear it pronounced. It's going to give me a glossary definition. It's going to parse the word for me. It's going to do so much. So I encourage you to set it up like this. It seems to me to work a lot better, a lot less congestive. Totally your choice, but this is what works for me. So in addition to customizing this layout or this guide report, you'll notice at the bottom right we have 2 separate tabs for text comparison. One allows me to compare the English text. You see here I have the ESV, I have the NKJV, the NRSV, and the NLT. So this is a good representation of some of the most popular translations that are out there. Then I have a text comparison of some of the more modern Greek versions. I have the SBL GNT, the Westcott and Hort, which is Logos WH, the NA28, which I love, the Byzantine text, which is Robertson Pierpont. That's basically forms what we know as the New King James, and then the Scrivener 1881, which forms the basis of the Textus Receptus or the King James Version. So this is a great layout for comparing text, doing that initial work of text comparison, but then diving into a word study with what's on the left. Again, we have BDAG on the left, and we can continue to dig into our terms there. So now we know what we're looking at. What can we do with this layout? Because that's really what matters here. The first thing we can do, and I alluded to it earlier, is we can do textual comparison. We can investigate textual differences across our Bible. First thing we can do is we can investigate how different English translations render a verse. You'll notice if you're reading through the ESV, this verse is verse 3, but notice it skips from 3 to verse 5. So it says, in these lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. But at the end of this verse, you'll see a footnote represented as a 3, and it says in the pop-up window, some manuscripts insert wholly or in part this verse, waiting for the moving of the water, for an angel of the Lord went down at certain seasons into the pool, and stirred the water. Whoever stepped into it first, after the stirring of the water, was healed of whatever disease he had. So that's a whole verse that's in one manuscript and not in another, or in one English translation and not in another. So this is pretty significant. We need to investigate this. So we'll go down here and to our text comparison tool, and we'll see that the ESV, we've read that, but then the NKJV has a totally different reading. At the bottom of the reading, you'll see that it's 60.9% different. It does add the verse that is in the footnote. So another way, I've lost a couple of my sections here just from a refreshing, so let me add those quick. We want sermons, and we want commentaries, and we want parallel passages. All right, there we go. So again, doing the textual comparison, we can come up here into our exegetical guide, click apparatus, and we can have a quick comparison of Greek versions that we can then use our text comparison tool for. But if you scroll up to the entry before this one, here you can see that what this apparatus does is it compares modern editions of the Greek New Testament. The reading like the ESV that does not include verse 4 is represented in the Westcott and Hort, Trigeles, and the NA28. But there is one text that does include verse 4, and that's the Robertson Pierpont. That's the Byzantine text, which is why the New King James reads the way that it does. So that's one thing that you can do with this layout. The second thing you can do is a bit of exegetical work. If you look with me at verse 2, so we're going to go to our ESV, scroll up just a tad to the verse before it, we'll notice that it says, "Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool." In Aramaic, it's called Bethsaida. This is important because the book of John, some people think, was written after the destruction of Jerusalem, but verse 2 says, "Now there is in Jerusalem." This word "is," if you hover over it, you get a small bar at the bottom of the resource window that says it's the verb eimi, or comes from the verb eimi, which is present, active, indicative, third person singular. It's translated as "is." That's present tense. So when the writer of John was writing this book, and he's writing this account, at that point, this pool was still in existence, which is a great argument against a late writing for the book of John. So that's one thing that we can do, some exegetical work. We can do some text comparison. The third thing we can do is a deep level of word study on a Greek term. Again, we're in verse 2 in our ESV. We can double-click. Let's get our NA28 over here. If we highlight the word pool in our ESV, again, it highlights the term pool in our NA28. We can then double-click the term in the Greek New Testament and see the entry right here. It's translated as pool, swimming pool, and there's our reference, John 5:2. Another interesting word in this text is in verse 8, which we can scroll down and see. Here Jesus tells the paralytic man, he says, "Get up, take up your bed, and walk." I know some translations that I've memorized in the past say, "Get your pallet, take up your pallet and walk." So this word here is what I'm interested in. We can highlight it in the English and see it in the Greek. Now we can double-click the Greek term, and we can see how it's translated. There again, our reference, John 5:8-11. I love that feature. So again, this is what we can do with this layout. We can do text comparison. We can do exegetical work, investigating word forms. We can do a deep level of word study. But you'll go up to the exegetical guide. Again, we've added some sections which have gone away again. That's fine. This is good practice for you guys. You see how I do this. Come in here, add commentaries, and then parallel passages. Under parallel passages, now I can see multiple accounts of this story, which if you look under the synopsis of the four Gospels, the healing of the paralytic man occurs in Matthew 9, Mark 2, Luke 5, and John 5. And it's important that we see these different accounts of the same story so that we can get a full picture of what happened that day. Each author is going to emphasize the story a different way because they have a message they want to get across. It doesn't mean that one text is more true than the next. Far from it. It means that we need to compare the text to get a better understanding of that story as a whole. So I hope that you use the textual comparison here, the parallel text section of this guide report. We can also consult some of our favorite commentaries. Just show you a list of mine here. These are some of my favorite that I've prioritized. You can always prioritize your commentaries by going into your library window, clicking prioritize at the top right. You'll see here I've got the New International Commentary, New American Commentary, Word Biblical Commentary, Black's New Testament, and I've ordered them in the way that I prefer them. So one more section that I want to show you here on what this sermon layout can do is we go under sermons. Now, this is something that I've recently added to my workflow because it's that powerful, it's that helpful. It helps me take my sermon to the next step. Now, right here we're looking under John 5:8, and we see that we have a sermon by Mark Driscoll in our archives and also one by Timothy Keller. These are tremendous collections of sermons, and Logos has gone through and found when these men preached on this passage. So that's one thing that it does. Another thing it does is that we've not only tagged sermon collections by reference, but also by topic. Now that's amazing. So I can actually go in and open up a sermon starter guide, which I'll do from the guides menu. It's going to open up in a small window, and I'm going to go ahead and maximize my screen here. So in the Sermon Starter Guide, we can type in a passage like we did. So we could type in John, let's say John 15, 1 through 5. And you'll see under sermons here, relevant sermons that apply to that text. Some by Driscoll, some from Sermon Outlines, and several from Timothy Keller, who I love. But we can also, beyond a text, we can type in a concept, a topic. So I can type in miracle here and click enter. And now going into the sermon section, check this out. We've got a couple sermons here, one by Timothy Keller called Better Than Miracles, and it's not from our passage in John 5. It's actually from 1 Corinthians 13. I've looked through this sermon. It's a great sermon to check out, to get some of that application, to see what the Bible emphasizes over miracles. So a different way of thinking about it. We can do the same thing for a topic like creation. And type creation, and we'll press enter in our Sermon Starter Guide. And here we have a host of sermons by different preachers. Timothy Keller, again, he's preached on this topic several times. He's preached on new creation out of 1 Corinthians 15. He's preached on creation and rest out of Genesis 1, like we would imagine, and again, the Song of Creation out of the same text. I love sermon collections, and the way that Logos has tagged these and served them up in my guide reports makes it easier than ever for me to find the information that I need. So I hope that you take good advantage of these sermon collections. One that I highly recommend is Timothy Keller's. I use it on a weekly basis, but around the corner we have collections like John Piper on Prepub, McPherson on Prepub. Take advantage of these and take advantage of the tagging system. And the neat thing about Logos, it's not about just getting more resources. What Logos does with each and every resource that you own is we tag that resource and then serve up its results and content in passage guides, in Sermon Starter Guide, and Topic Guide. In different places, we give you the information you want quickly. I think Morris Proctor is the one that says that it's like your personal research assistant, and he's absolutely right there. So in just a minute, Art's going to give you some instructions about submitting your sample layouts. Please keep the questions coming. We're going to take those in just a second. Again, check out Timothy Keller's sermon collection. You won't be sorry. Thank you again.
All right, so we've had a few questions come in, and we only have a few minutes to answer some of them, so we're going to get to them right away. The first question here that we have is there one resource that I could substitute for the Greek New Testament?
That's a good question. Let's go back to our layout just for a second. I'm going to close this window. And you notice on the right that I do have the Greek New Testament. One thing that I like to do is to use an interlinear or a reverse interlinear. You can do that by coming into your ESV panel, clicking Display, and then selecting Inline, which is going to take the Greek text, word information, and all that good stuff, and put it right, whoops, clicked it twice, and it's going to put it right within your English text. So you can get access to original language information right within your English Bible. It's a quick way to do it. Another interlinear that I would recommend, this one for the Old Testament, is the LHI, the Lexham Hebrew English Interlinear Bible. I still use this all the time. I love this text. So take advantage of these resources. You don't have to be a Greek scholar by any stretch of the imagination to get the most out of a sermon layout like this. I sometimes don't have time to go into the Greek and to do all the work that maybe I should do, but a great way to streamline that is to get into your interlinear and let Logos do some of that work for you. Good question.
All right, we have another question for you. One of our listeners wants to know, how do you take notes as you study?
That's another good question. My process, to be honest, is when I build my sermon, I use Evernote, but I do use Logos when I'm translating a passage because it tags a note very well to the word that I'm studying. If that word's alluded to in an earlier text or is repeated throughout a passage that I'm translating, I do use Logos. If you're not familiar with notes, you go into Documents and your note selection here, and you get to create a note file, and then you get to add as many notes to that file as you want. I also use, and this is kind of a side, but I take my sermons. I actually create my sermons in a full manuscript. I take my manuscripts and I use the personal book builder. So that's something that I would highly recommend. You can take your manuscripts that are in a Word doc and you can actually ingest them into your Logos software so that they're indexed. You can search for them. And that's just an amazing way to house all the work that you've put into Sunday's sermon. Good question.
All right, we've got time for one or two more. I've got one thing I wanted to share with you guys before we continue with the questions, though. One of the featured products that Todd shared today was the Tim Keller Sermon Series. And you can find more information about this awesome series at logos.com/Tim Keller. So another reader wants to know, is there a preaching resource you would recommend?
If I was to choose one preaching resource that I use more than any other, it would be, and this is not hard for me to come up with, it would be Stephen Mathewson's The Art of Preaching Old Testament Narrative. So we can go in and say The Art of Preaching. I want to show you this. I actually have this copy in my library. I use it all the time. It's a great text. Preaching historical narrative is very unique. It's not epistle. It's not prophecy. It's something kind of in its own field. And what Mathewson does here is he walks you through step by step, preaching the stories of the Bible that people love to hear. He helps you pull out the information that's important. Maybe it's through a literary feature. Maybe it's something that in the past you've glossed over a couple times. He just opened my eyes to some very significant points that I need to be emphasizing in my sermon. So this is just a personal thing. I love the Old Testament. That's where I went to school and studied. But Old Testament historical narrative, that's kind of where my heart is. Good question.
We've got one that just came in. This is going to be our last question, and this is a really good question we wanted to share with you guys. And again, we want to thank all of you that submitted questions. We will respond via email, so please check your inbox soon. This last question is, when I searched for creation and miracles, I could not find the sermon collection Todd was able to pull up. Why is this?
That was probably a miscommunication on my part. If you go under here, I'm going to add, actually we need to go back to our Sermon Starter Guide. Go into Guides and then Sermon Starter Guide. I'm going to go ahead and open it again in a floating window so you guys can get the best view of it. So the question was, when I type in miracle or creation, these topics, I'm not getting the same results. Good question. What I have in my library are a couple collections. You saw one by Driscoll and here one by Keller. I also have a couple that I want to add. Those are going to show up as add-on resources in my library. Not part of my base package. I had to buy them separately. Here I have Tim Keller's. You can go online, check out this sermon collection. But if you're not seeing these results, it's because you do not own the collection. Each collection is sold separately. And again, we have a bunch that are on the rise. I think we just finished up D.A. Carson, which I can't wait to get my hands on, one of my favorite speakers and authors. But again, if you're not seeing these results, it's because you do not own these collections at this point.
All right, thanks, Todd. So Todd, again, referenced Tim Keller. And this is a great resource if you guys want to learn more about sermon prep and want assistance. Highly recommend you check out the Tim Keller resource at logos.com/Tim Keller. Sorry about that. Also, if you don't own a base package, you can find information about all our base packages at logos.com/L5BP. Right. So to watch past webinars, head over to watch past webinars, head over to logos.com/webinar-archive. logos.com/webinar-archive. Sorry, I don't have that screenshot up for you. Thanks for joining us today. We highly recommend that if you guys do want to share us your screenshots, to send those to us at webinars@logos.com. We've already received quite a few of them, and some of them are great. But also share with us why you like this layout. What is it about the layout that you're sharing with us that works for you? We'd really love to hear some feedback from that. So please forward those to us at webinars@logos.com. And again, thanks so much for joining us today. Our next webinar is scheduled for mid-October. We'll be sending out an email roughly a week prior to the event date. You'll be able to sign up to be a part of that webinar. But until then, I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you so much.